everything moves these days towards let's do something practical. And so there's lots of people working with some incredibly beautiful work on using nanotechnology to make things practical.
Hi, this is Dr. Jed Macosko at academicinfluence.com and Wake Forest University. And today we have a special Nobel Prize-winning guest, Professor Bob Curl, who spent most of his academic career at Rice University, and he's a chemist. So as a fellow person who trained in chemistry, I just have to ask, what have you found most exciting about being in the field of chemistry?
Well, of course, the work that led to the prize was obviously the most exciting thing that we have ever done. I've enjoyed lots of other things that I've done that were not involved with working with Rick Smalley or working on doing anything regarding carbon chemistry. Most of my career has been in molecular spectroscopy, which is kind of a field that doesn't lead to great excitement except to the people doing it as a general rule. So I'm very proud of certain things I did in molecular spectroscopy. Also did work in chemical kinetics, primarily with free radical reactions. That's sort of the general thing about it. It is incredibly strange, actually. Rick did his graduate work at Princeton with Elliot Bernstein, and his work at Princeton was in molecular spectroscopy. And he did an incredible amount of work on his PhD. He learned all sorts of useful laboratory techniques, working with liquid helium temperatures, doing all sorts of Zeeman and Stark effects. Out of his graduate work, 2 publications resulted. Together, they've been cited 16 times. Now, Rick has 23 papers with over 1,000 citations. And I expected he spent more work on his graduate education than he did on any one of those papers.
Isn't that interesting? Well, first of all, tell me, how did you first meet Rick? Was it at Rice University, Rick Smalley?
He came to interview for the job at Rice. This was, as I recall, it must have been the spring of 1976. And he had been doing incredibly exciting work as a postdoctoral at Chicago with trying to come up with the names correctly. Leonard Bernstein was not his postdoctoral advisor, but they worked together with published papers with this guy.
It's okay.
Let me think about it for a minute. Donald Levy.
Okay.
And actually, as soon as he came to Rice and did these presented his work, we were just excited. So astoundingly good work, so novel and thrilling what he'd done. So effectively, after he left the room, we had a quick vote. The chemistry department voted we should hire him, but then we had to tell him, yes, we want to hire you, but only the president can make an official appointment. So anyway, he actually, this work that he did as a postdoc, he actually started himself. What happened was that after he did his research work at Princeton and actually got the papers written, he moved with his wife and family to Chicago. And he still hadn't finished a PhD because there was a final exam. And they do the cruel thing at that time, at least at Princeton, of after a guy's done all his work, they make him come up with an initial exciting new proposal for research. And so it happened that Don Levy was away when he got to Chicago, so he wasn't any pressure to start there. He didn't know what he was going to be working on or anything. And he was coming up with this proposal, and he came up with a proposal that actually for this work that led him to be hired at Rice. This was cooling of supersonic cooling of molecules that his original aim was to make it easier to resolve the structure of complicated spectra, but it led to a whole lot of other things ultimately. So this was sort of a strange story. How Leonard got involved was that he was the go-to guy at Chicago for supersonic cooling, supersonic expansions. And so while Don was still in Europe, he went to see Leonard and got all the ins and outs of supersonic expansions and cooling from Leonard. So this, as you know, it was really a remarkable thing. Actually, I had already collaborated with Don Levy on the molecule that Rick started on for reducing the complication of spectrum nitrogen dioxide. So it turns out that science is sort of an incestuous thing when you hear about it. How people.
Well, I know that is true, and one of the things that I really enjoyed when I was interviewing another Nobel Prize-winning scientist was just hearing about that first phone call. I'm sure it's similar for everybody, but do you remember back in the 90s when you got that phone call?
Well, I didn't get the phone call. Oh, there's a strange thing. Apparently, the Nobel Committee is very, very careful that the news doesn't get out prematurely. Okay, so in order to maintain secrecy, sometimes they resort to using the telephone directory. And so they had called Houston and asked for telephone directory for Robert Curl. And there happened to be another guy named Robert Curl who must have gotten a very interesting phone call.
You've won the Nobel Prize.
That's happened before, by the way.
Oh, goodness. What a story. So how did you find out about it?
Well, I was having a late breakfast with my sister who was visiting us and her husband. And so the phone rang, and so I went up, picked up the phone, and the person at the other end explained that they were from ABC Radio News and asked me how I felt about winning the Nobel Prize.
Oh, no.
And so I was a little bit concerned that it might be like, do you keep Prince Albert in the can? Phone call. I have been pranked before.
Yeah, I know that feeling. Wow.
So I kept, trying to get more out of it, and finally decided this must be legitimate. And so I did talk briefly with that. My wife hates this and says it isn't true at all, but I claim that I went back to breakfast and said, I just had to call. The guy said I won the Nobel Prize. And I claim that she said, "That's nice, dear."
Well, I can see how she would hate you repeating that story, but it might be true. She might have been engrossed in something else that was grabbing her attention at the time. But well, good for you. That must have been fun. Was it a fun trip to Sweden? And
It's
did she
it's
enjoy it
it's
with you?
exhausting.
Was it exhausting? Oh, okay.
Nobel things for the awardees. It's an exhausting trip.
Yeah, I can imagine they keep you busy.
I actually slept well because I was always so tired by the time I get to bed. There's all these, you've got to go here, you've got to go do there, you've got to meet this people, lots of handshaking, all this. But Rick told me after they're all over that he couldn't sleep. So he came back really exhausted. It only took me about 4 days to get over it, but I think it took Rick a little longer.
Wow.
Anyway.
Well, maybe it was just too exciting for him, and I'm glad you were able to handle the stress so well. Oh, that must have been really fun. Anyway, well, it is fun to hear some of your reflections on the past. Do you have things that you think about for the future of the United States chemistry program, maybe at Rice University or in the United States at large? Things maybe in the nanotechnology area, or what would you say for the future?
Well, I could, the nanotechnology has more largely through Rick's efforts has bloomed in the United States and around the world because of almost not single-handedly, but he played a major role in getting the U.S. National Nanotechnology Initiative started in 2001. It's we run into a sort of a strange problem. I always wanted to learn something, know something different. Okay, and everything moves these days towards let's do something practical. And so there's lots of people working with some incredibly beautiful work on using nanotechnology to make things practical. The leader of it, in my opinion, the leader of this is a guy named Federico Capasso, who is he's at Harvard in the applied physics program. Anyway, he's done a lot of very beautiful work manipulating light using nanotechnology, arrays of nano elements. But I've never been all that much interested in doing things practical. It's a big contrast with Rick. Rick, we had this funny story along about 1995, early 1996. We began to wonder because people had samples of the various fullerenes since 1990, and it spread across the world, and thousands of people worked for thousands of things. And by the time early 1996 came along, no real high-profile practical thing has been done with it. And that's still true. And so Rick and I used to talk about, the kid doesn't have a job yet, sort of thing. And so from then on, Rick was all focused on doing something practical. And that's what he spent the rest of his career on, his unfortunately, rather short career.
Yeah, unfortunately.
But
it's nice to know that you could do what you did without really worrying about the practical aspect, just focusing on the things that were beautiful, fun, interesting. And that's a good piece of advice to those who are heading out into the future of science, to look for things that are just purely beautiful and fun.
Well, I can't claim that what we did was exactly directed. I think the discovery of the fullerenes was really one of those cases of the lucky accident. Fortunately, it also involves a prepared mind, or minds. So, but that was, it was not something we set out to do.
Yeah, but isn't that how it always is? And it's just fun it's just literally just fun to have a conversation with you, having gone through that amazing discovery and the accidents and the prepared mind. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us, and look forward to hearing more from you in the future.
Anyway, I never answered your question, and that's because I was asked that question at some radio program or some TV program in Stockholm. And what do we think? The guy turned to me after I'd gone about, everybody else was talking, and I'd practically gone to sleep. He turned to me and said, Professor Curl, what do you see as the most important work and discoveries in the field of chemistry for the next 20 years? And of course, the answer is, how would I know? But I couldn't.
That's a good answer. Well, thank you so much for that wise and insightful answer, which was from 20 years ago, but is still true today. So thank you very much. We really appreciate you coming on this show with us. Thank you.